Yes, that's fine, thanks.
Wonderful. Good afternoon, and good afternoon to Carol, and good afternoon to all of those who've had the opportunity to join us this afternoon. It's a great pleasure to have this opportunity to share some thoughts with you. Like many who are watching at the moment, I have spent a number of years in my own personal research into spiritual philosophy, and as a result of those inquiries, I've come across an explanation for the symbolism of the story of Adam and Eve, and we'd like to commence this afternoon's presentation by sharing that explanation with you. It takes on a very deep and profound symbolic context. The full significance of this, I quite honestly could not begin to comprehend. So this is the what I can understand version, basically. We were given to understand that in the very beginning of human inhabitants entering the earth plane, that they were in fact of such a high spiritual caliber that they were equipped with the opportunity to simply manifest a physical body for themselves to come into. That it was not in fact through a process of a woman becoming pregnant and then giving birth to a child, but just simply using the power of the Spirit to manifest a physical vehicle and then occupying that vehicle to experience life in the physical dimension. We're then given to understand that within this physical universe, that there are a number of influences acting upon the individuals who dwell here, not the least of which is the process of temptation. The story of Adam and Eve being tempted to sample the forbidden fruit actually signifies the fact that they discovered the process of sexual intercourse and took to using that to then bring further members of the human community into the earth plane. As a result of that, the energies stored in the sacred energy centers of the body lost a lot of their powers, and humans were then no longer able to simply manifest a physical body for themselves, but then became restricted to entering the physical arena through the process that we're so familiar with today. Now, anyone who's done any sort of research into spiritual philosophy has probably looked further afield and delved into some of the more ancient philosophies that have been expressed through a great diversity of cultures and religious formats throughout the world. And we tend to find that there's one unifying quality that's found within each of these, regardless of the time period or the culture or the language differences. They all strive to seek an understanding of the universal truth. There is also one other unifying fact that links every human being throughout all of the history of humans, and that is quite simply what we call human nature. As a result of the influences that this world has upon humans dwelling here, the human nature is often tested considerably. We're brought initially into a physical body for the first few times with very little, if any, experience of life in this particular domain. And as such, we're equipped with only the very basics, the survival instincts, the often referred to as the lower instincts or the animal instincts, And it is then a process of trial and error for many who seek to survive in this environment, providing for themselves the bare essentials to make that possible. Now, when an individual is exposed to the various influences that are found here, they're often brought into contact with other humans who are also, many of them, still utilizing a quite profound use of their own base or animal instincts. And this can cause conflicts to arise between various individuals and various groups. We are seeing this in our world constantly. There are differences in opinions with regard to the nature of God, with regard to many of the constructs of the various religions that are on the earth, and those believing themselves to be right above all others have often taken up arms or entered into other levels of conflict. There have been a great deal of fear that has arisen as a result of this, and this has brought about divisions within humanity, segregating us into different races, different religions, different modes of thought, so on and so forth. Now, it poses the question, why would spirit choose to enter an environment like this, knowing full well the range of difficulties, the levels of aggravation, of separation, the absence of the profound levels of love that are found in the higher realms of life? You would imagine that the Creator must have had quite a significant purpose in creating this dimension of life and then populating it with the human species among the other great diversity of aspects of life that are present here. I've met a number of spiritualists who are, quite frankly, fed up with life in this dimension. They've become disappointed in many of their fellow travellers. They've gone through a number of difficult experiences in their life that they would not wish to repeat. And they've stated quite clearly that they have no intention of ever returning back here again. Quite an understandable attitude. But what is neglected in this is the fact that they weren't forced to come here in the first place, and that we were in fact made well aware of a great many of the difficulties and the challenges that would confront us in this particular sojourn through this physical universe. We are also given to understand that a big part of the driving influence that brings us back here again and again is that of unsatisfied, unfulfilled desires. Now, these desires may cross a huge and broad range, all contained within the aspects of human nature. And we're given to understand that it is not until we have risen above these cravings, these desires for satisfactions of aspects of our being that can only be satisfied here within a physical body. There are perhaps a great many lifetimes required in order to reach that level of elevation. We often find that there is such a diversity of aspects available in life that we're constantly entertained. There's always something new, something different. And it can often be this insatiable appetite to explore the differences, to try something new, to try something better, or what is perceived perhaps to be better, that can often become not just a positive but also a negative influence in the lives of many people. There are, as an example, people who've entered into a marriage with a partner. They've made a commitment to be faithful to that partner, but this insatiable appetite to explore the possibility that the grass is greener elsewhere has caused them to go astray. And as such, they've often then found themselves entering into levels of deception in order to sustain the commitment that they've made to their partner, and yet satisfy these additional cravings that are rising to the surface from their base animal nature. Now, some people are in fact quite skilled in concealing these. They've put on a face that's quite convincing on the surface, and it brings to the mind, the mental aspect of the partner, the fact that they are in a safe and a relationship in which the vows that were taken are being fulfilled, regardless of the partner's deception. What is not taken into account is the fact that within the heart of the partner that has violated this trust is a deeper level of knowing, that which we often refer to as the conscience. This is directly related to levels of consciousness that are streaming forth from the spirit, through the soul, and down through the various levels of manifestation that have eventually facilitated coming into a physical body. This conscience, knowing full well that it has brought about a level of conflict within the individual perpetrating these deceptions, sends out an energy that is not always detectable on an intellectual level, but is nonetheless perceived by the heart of the partner. As such, particularly in the case of women, they then become suspicious. The intuitive nature, which is associated with the heart, serves as an indicator that not everything is right. And the energies that are then brought into that relationship create divisions and eventually conflicts, and quite often result in huge levels of separation. The divorce rate in our community serves as a classic example of the fact that this is constantly taking place. The heart center operates on a level that is cooperating with the mind and our 5 physical senses that relay information into the mind. They are supposedly meant to function together in a unison, with each complementing the other, which is why people enter into marriages in the first place. Of course, that's purely on the male and female combination, and there are a great many diversities within relationships these days that extend beyond those parameters. But for the sake of simplicity in this presentation, we're going to stick with the combination of masculine and feminine energies serving as complementary to one another. Now, when conflict arises between the heart and the mind, then an individual can find themselves with a severe drain on their natural energies. These energies are consumed within this conflict, and the more the mind focuses on aspects of this, the more energies are directed into these conflicting aspects, which simply empowers them and brings them into even greater prominence. Because of this, there is a tendency to try and avoid or escape the focus of the mind. And this is why we find so many people having such difficulties with isolation at the moment. Many of the distractions that have served to divert the energies of the mind outwardly rather than into these levels of internal conflict are no longer available to us in the present social situation that we're currently experiencing. This is causing a great deal of grief for a number of people. They're having now to look far more closely at themselves because of the isolation they find themselves in. The lack of distractions from themselves serves now as a purifying influence. And it is felt that perhaps the Creator has facilitated this current situation as part of the program to raise the spiritual energies within the earth plane, to call humans to have to look more closely at themselves and the nature of honesty within that particular approach. The mind can go into all sorts of levels of stress and anxiety, and that in itself can lead to a lot of the mental illnesses that are also becoming quite prominent in our community in this particular time. Things are coming to a head, so to speak. There's a certain influence at work within the entire earth plane, and it would appear that this influence is subjecting every human being to a process of cleansing through this inner inquiry into the exact nature of themselves, their integrity, and the ability to rise above the temptations that are so prevalent in this particular domain of life. It would seem that the heart center functions on a great many levels within our being, and we find this quite evident within our own language. We speak quite freely about getting to the heart of the matter and using the reference to the heart in many contexts that suggest that there is an essence within this particular center. And this, in fact, is quite true. There are many who believe that the presence of the level of consciousness being expressed within the physical from the spirit takes up its greatest seat within the heart center, and that it is instrumental in so many ways in governing the well-being of the body. As we know from a purely anatomical point of view, the heart is responsible for circulating the life force throughout the body within the blood, bringing essential elements to the mind, providing it with oxygen so that the mind can continue to function, and function hopefully with some level of clarity. The heart takes on a huge level of significance with regard to the quality of life that we experience here in our physical bodies. It would make sense, therefore, to look after the heart in ways that would nurture its capacity and bring it to a greater level of fulfillment. But in order to do this, there needs to be then a cooperation from the mind to facilitate the directives of the heart. To put it quite simply, this means listening to the conscience and following the directions that are given to us by our own higher nature. Now, this runs contrary to many of the habitual tendencies that the mind has set itself into, particularly those that have been long established through a great many lifetimes. And stepping outside of these well-worn ruts within the mental faculties is an exceptionally difficult process. It's one that requires a great deal of power, a sense of determination, a great use of what we would call the willpower. And this, we believe, is also facilitated through the heart center. It is the heart center that summons the energies of the spirit into a format that we call the willpower to concentrate consciousness. And it is only through a concentrated level of consciousness that we are able to bring about a sense of unity between the mind and the heart center. It's interesting that there is a tendency to strive towards this unison within every religion that has ever been and currently exists upon the earth center. So often we find people entering into prayer by bringing the hands together. We find this incorporated into many of the greetings that are used when people meet each other. This symbolic act signifies the bringing together of the masculine and feminine energies into a state of oneness, something that we would refer to as a wholeness of being. Now, in order to facilitate this wholeness of being, bringing both the rational and logical faculties of the mind into harmony with the powers of the heart center, there needs to be a unifying force capable of facilitating this particular union that we're referring to. We're all well aware of the powers of love. It is love that brings people together. It is love that connects people with so many of the aspects of their life. They have a zest for particular pathways because, in their own words, they love doing it. It is this universal energy of love that streams forth from the Creator constantly. And it is only by choosing to utilize this into our everyday life that we can then facilitate a greater flow of this energy through both of these centers within our being. As we work with love, we work then with the voice of the Spirit. It brings us into greater harmony with our own conscience, and it brings about the higher aspects of human nature, everything from compassion and empathy to the heroic nature, one of self-sacrifice, and there are many other qualities that are held in the highest regard within the human race that are all, in effect, the outworkings or the flow into the physical world of the power of love. These are challenging times for all of us, and if we're looking to survive these difficult times, with the knowledge that they are more than likely only going to become even more difficult yet before we move fully into the new age, the essential need to incorporate this unifying energy into our being is the only thing that's going to bring about a level of inner contentment, peace, some level of unity within our being that will see us maintain a far better level of health, both mentally, emotionally, and physically. And this, after all, is one of the aspects of the human being that we find common throughout all of the nations of our planet. Now, how are we going for time here? Can't hear you, sorry.
Few more minutes.
Few more minutes, lovely,
Yeah.
Thank you. Once we get wound up, it's possible for us to go on with some considerable length. I've put a clock next to me so I can keep an eye on it, but I just wanted to check to make
Just
sure
a little bit
that I'm
more.
overstepping at parameters here. What lies before each one of us at this point in time is an opportunity to meet each of these challenges that we're finding in our life as a result of the circumstances that the government is implementing at the moment. The restrictions are tightening even further, and we're going to find that there's going to be an even stronger need for an individual to feel comfortable within their own skin. And the desires that were there previously to satisfy this level of inner satisfaction, this level of happiness that we have perhaps previously had a tendency to seek through the presence of other people, is no longer going to be present in the ways in which so many of us would perhaps seek. And as such, there's a pressure being put on people, and it's a pressure that some people are feeling is going to break them. They're being driven into levels of despair, anxiety, fear is taking a hold of them, and they've lost touch with the fact that everything in life is for a divine purpose, that the Creator has manifested these challenging situations for us in order to provide an opportunity for a greater use of the will power, summoning forth a greater influence from our own spiritual nature and allowing us golden opportunities to manifest this in the face of these current situations. To meet others through the internet is a wonderful opportunity, but it's just not the same. I miss my hugs. It doesn't have the same levels of warmth that we're used to experiencing when we're in the company of friends. So we're having to find now a source of this warmth from within ourselves. And this is exactly what love does. It not only serves to bring a sense of wholeness into our own being, it brings with it a knowing that we are a child of the Creator, constantly provided for, constantly nurtured and guided for our own greatest well-being. Our purpose in being here is not to suffer, but rather to find the qualities deep within ourselves that will assist us in rising above all challenges that are present within the physical dimension of life, overcoming the temptations, and then finding ourselves seeking aspects of life that only are to be found in the higher realms. And when we have purified the heart center, as it is so often said, it is then that we will find our own divine nature. We will find the God within. So, in our striving forward in this process of purifying the heart center and bringing it into unison with the male logical aspects of the mind, it is our hope, our desire that each one of us may find the courage to delve deep within and summon forth that which eagerly awaits an expression and is there to fulfill our deepest wishes. On that note, we'd like to thank you now for having been granted the opportunity to have shared these thoughts with you this afternoon. We're unable to remain with the service now owing to the data usage that we're having to consume at the moment, but we wish now to leave with you a quote that I've found to be one of my favourites. It was a quote from one of the previous British Prime Ministers, the name of whom eludes me at the moment. But he said, we look forward to the day when the love of power is replaced with the power of love.